Hi, welcome to That Reminds Me Of, a podcast about film and the films that remind us of that film. You're here with Baron and the Doc.
And the Maestro.
Do we need another drink?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Baron and the Maestro all
Doc.
together on Zoom.
Doc.
Hello.
Maestro, Doc, fellas, how are you?
All good. Good. Feeling well.
Good. Well, this is weird. We haven't done this for a while, have we?
This reminds me of the good old days in COVID.
That's
when
right.
we were forced to zoom it in.
I believe we did one episode, Jojo Rabbit, in person, and then all hell broke loose and COVID descended upon us. And then I think we might have done almost 30 episodes on Zoom after that.
Well, plus the Jojo Rabbit may have been in person, but it wasn't video recorded. So we were still audio then. So
Oh, you're right.
really
You're
all
right.
of our first however many episodes were Zoomies.
In fact, probably the reason why we did video at all is because Zoom just has that record function there, and we were using it for work all the time in COVID. If you remember, it was every second video was a Zoom recording. No, not every second. Every video was a Zoom recording, and so that's probably what kicked it all off. And guess which episode we're up to now?
I have no idea. We'd be pushing 70, but probably 69.
69. Yes, indeed.
Very
Yep,
sexy.
Episode 69. Very sexy. And today, for episode 69, we are talking about Triangle of Sadness by Ruben Östlund.
Just funnily, 69 divides very well into three. And we're talking about the Triangle of Sadness.
Yes.
And a triangle is nothing without three sides. So we thought we'd have three sides of this conversation and bring Maestro, usually behind the scenes, into the frame.
That's correct. Yeah, it would be super weird to do this on Zoom, but just like hide Maestro's screen for the whole thing.
Yeah, it would be a bit strange.
A little rude.
A bit rude as well.
Well, I'm happy to have Maestro up front though, because I
Me
know
too.
this film in particular, we watched it at MIF. Maestro, you saw it at MIF as well, didn't you?
Yes, I saw
Yeah.
MIF and I saw again 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
The plan
Seen
had
it
always
twice.
been to talk about it shortly after seeing it at MIF, but you know how things go. It's quite a few months later. However, this film is at the cinemas still
Now,
and is receiving all sorts of award buzz. So good time to go see it.
And it's nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, I believe,
Yep, I think you were
wow.
right.
as it should be. I'm just going to get straight out there and say Ruben Östlund is one of my absolute dearest favorites. I love his back catalogue and looking forward to this, even though I saw it at MIP and I haven't seen it since. So my memory's a bit sketchy. And I wouldn't mind maybe someone, perhaps the Maestro, giving us an IMDb synopsis just to refresh my memory.
Yes, before the MD synopsis, I can confirm it's got 3 nominations. One for Best Motion Picture of the Year, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Achievement in Directing.
Beautiful.
So,
Well deserved for all 3 of those.
Yeah, I think so. So the synopsis is very short. It's a fashion model celebrity couple join an eventful cruise for the super rich.
Cruise for the super rich.
Super rich.
That really doesn't tell you an awful lot, does it?
No.
Not really, because
Not
I mean
really.
that's just the setup. That's just the
Yeah.
beginning.
Yeah.
What makes this film interesting? Well, no, it's not true. It's all interesting. Even the early scenes of this film are really interesting. But what makes you sit on the edge of your seat and get, lean right forward is what comes after everyone's on the cruise. And we'll get into that. I just wanted to mention, Doc, you mentioned before that Ruben Östlund's a favorite of yours. That's the first thing I've written down in my notes is how many times you've mentioned Ruben Östlund over the 69 episodes that we've recorded so far. I know he's a favorite of yours. And I can say that, I'd seen Force Majeure before and really enjoyed it. I haven't seen The Square, but this, as the second Ruben Östlund film that I've seen, just confirms what an amazing auteur, writer, director this guy is.
Yeah, I haven't seen his whole catalogue, mind you. I've seen Involuntary, which I reckon I've mentioned a couple of times. I've seen Force Majeure, which the rest of the world has.
Yep.
Which is probably the best to me. The Square, which was hugely successful. And then this one, and a couple of shorts. But he's just got such a unique perspective, and everything there's a through line through all of his work that you can just tell it's it's Ruben Östlund.
Actually, I lied. There is one shot of his that I've seen as well. It's the one where there's a bank robbery and it's just a single locked off shot of a street and the outside of a bank, and you see everything play out in real time. And it's just phenomenal. What a great idea for a short.
It's phenomenal. From memory, that one, like everything else, it just presents you with a situation and doesn't tell you how to think. And both the characters in the story and yourself are just wondering, what are you meant to think in this? What are you meant to do if you're in there? So it's a whole lot of sociology and psychology is explored.
The thing that really struck me about that film too was just, if you just plant a camera in a still position and watch a long thing play out, a long scene play out, and in particular, if the camera's not moving and it's quite far away, you really get this sense of just being a bystander, which you don't get often in films. And it's sort of like you're an active bystander, because that's exactly how you would see something like that play out. You would be on the other side of the road, just watching it in absolute just surprise and wonder and fascination, unable to walk away or look away because you need to see what happens next. So clever.
Yeah, terribly clever.
And that's something about this guy that you can just say full stop. Clever. Like, how clever is Ruben Östlund?
I saw a couple of interviews with him, and like he's very clever in how he talks about his work as well. But one thing that struck me was that he reminded me in his delivery of our friend the Maestro. I don't know how, but when he was talking, he talks with this passion, and the glint in his eye reminded me of you, Maestro.
Thank you. I think it's the European, probably. Background.
I think that has something to do.
It's something to do with the Northern Hemisphere, probably.
Shall we get into the film?
Yes.
Yeah, yes. And one thing off the bat, I'm reminded again of last episode, Baron, when you set up Avatar, an awful film, but you set it up beautifully with the 3 acts, which I'd fallen asleep through half of it, so I barely noticed the 3 acts of Avatar. But in this film, it's called Triangle of Sadness. Everything revolves around threes, and the 3 acts are as clear as in anything you would ever see. Like there are almost three distinct movies. So I don't know, is that some way to frame how we discuss this?
It's a great way to frame it. Did you want to do that, or do you want me to do it, or what are you thinking?
Oh, look, I'm very happy for someone else to do it, but if everyone falls over, I'll have a crack.
Okay. I think you've just nominated yourself.
Okay. Act 1 is for those who are watching the YouTube version of the show, starts with my background here with what's his name, that actor, that big tall model actor?
Harris Dickinson.
Harris Dickinson. Dickinson.
Yeah,
Dickinson.
Very talented.
By the way, on that name Dickinson, there's a great film called Dead Man by Jim Jarmusch, where there's a scene that's just stuck in my head of one of the guys who's really not a fan of one of the other characters, whose name is Dickinson, spelling it out, Dick in Son Dickinson.
So me and Jim have the same. That's the Johnny Depp soundtrack by Neil Young movie? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
very cool. Harris Dickinson,
which is very talented guy, I think.
Act 1 gives us Harris, who's a male model, and his girlfriend, who's some sort of influencer, and their relationship, and particularly a conversation that revolving around money. Like they're looking at gender norms and what gender means in their relationship and all these first world problem issues surrounding their relationship. That's Act 1. We then move to them on a cruise ship along with the rich and famous, and there's very much an upstairs downstairs vibe where you've got all the rich ones and then all the help having to belittle themselves to the whims of all the moneyed. That's Act 2. Act 3, the ship gets taken over by pirates, blah, 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 blah. It ends up that a few of them are stranded on a deserted island after escaping the pirate ship. And on the island, the power dynamics shift completely, and who was downstairs is now upstairs, And there's a whole new film really about how that plays out. So they're the
Absolutely.
3 acts, but it's like 3 films.
And each one of them, you know, more so than most films, is like a self-contained film. Like you could call Act One a perfect short film. You'd be happy
Yeah.
if that's what you got. And some of the characters that live within one act don't appear in any of the other acts. Also interesting, because that's unusual. So Woody Harrelson's character, for instance, the captain of the ship, he's exclusively an Act Two character. And
I think
what
that
a
was
great character.
budget related.
Yeah, sure. They had like 5 days with Woody, and they had to get it all squeezed in on this boat.
Yeah.
And even then, half the time it's just his voice over the PA that you hear,
Yeah.
or through a closed door.
That's true.
That's great. So one thing that you've sort of mentioned is you've got the upstairs, downstairs class thing going on. And that runs the whole way through. In that first act, what you're really getting a sense of is what beauty can do for a person in terms of moving them up social classes. That's something we don't talk about an awful lot, but it's something that's pretty apparent in this. And then in the second act, you've really got a sense of, like, even within the crew working on the ship, there's a class or a social sort of hierarchy going on where, you know, some people aren't allowed on deck, you know, or upstairs at all. Poor guy in the engine room gets mistaken for a pirate later on in the film because nobody's ever seen him before.
But there is in the first act, we still have a little sense of injustice. During the fashion parade, there are 4 people sitting on the first row, and someone says, "No, you need to move because there is someone more important than you, much more important than you, so you need to move out of the way." And our protagonist, one of our actors, then end up to be on the second row because they're all shifting the chairs.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely. Yeah, that was
so
great.
there is just a little little teasing around injustice and inequalities.
We'll have you here because you're good looking, but the second someone more important comes along, you're going to get bumped.
Yeah.
So should we just talk about some favorite bits from this film?
Well, I'm interested to hear from the Maestro. I know that you love this at MIF.
Basically, I mean, I really like the conversation at the first act between the boyfriends around the money and the gender, and the shift. I really like that because at the beginning you think that he's actually a dick, basically this guy, but then actually at the end when they're sitting at the hotel, the girlfriend admits that she actually has been she did what she did on purpose. So his reaction was actually quite justified, and that was a kind of the first everyone is always thinking about the first impression of a person, and I quite like that we then forced to understand actually it wasn't that right, they're wrong. And then on the island, probably the shift of the power that is happening on the island. If you like, later we can talk about what reminded of, because this is really reminding of an Italian movie.
Awesome.
We can talk about later if you like.
You mentioned Act One, and a couple of things on that the power shifts and how your allegiance goes from one character to the other. I think that's very Ruben Östlund, like wondering, who is in the right and like who to believe and how to interpret what is going on. That I think that's typically him. And number two on that, I watched an interview just today where he was describing that scene, and that is purely from his life. So that's him and his now wife. The scene is just taken verbatim from
beautiful.
his life.
That's
I don't know if it's beautiful or not. I usually hate that sort of crap, to be honest, but that's where it came from. In hindsight, that makes me feel that maybe it's a bit of like it could have been a short film, like you said, Baron, and does it even belong in this film?
That's a great call, because while I love that scene and I love that part of the first act, I had the same feeling. I had a real sense when I came out of the film. I think I even said this to Edith. You could lose that. You could start on the boat and this film would still be great. You could lose that whole first act and this film would still be great, because you still actually have a first act if you start on the boat. It's just that it's sort of extended by those early scenes where you get to know, what are their names? Carl and Yaya. So
yeah.
And they're not even really the main characters. It really is an ensemble piece. Like, you don't get a sense that those two are actually the protagonists throughout the film, even though they come in and out of importance. Yeah, I had a real sense you could lose it, but I'm happy it's in there. It's fun.
Isn't that funny? Yeah, I agree. I reckon you could and probably should lose it. It doesn't
Mm.
really fit, and the boat could be Act 1 and 2 easily.
You would have a tighter film. You would have a tighter film if that's what you did, I think. And actually, it would change the structure a little bit. It'd feel a little bit different in that, yeah, you would probably have the destruction of the boat would be your midpoint. And maybe it still is, although it just sort of feels like it comes later in the story with that extended first act.
Mm.
I sort of loved almost every scene of this film, I think. What he presents is it's this ongoing conflict of interesting characters that you kind of like, you kind of hate, or you very much hate. It's always a spectrum of like love hate, and understanding and loathing at the same time. Kind of feeling jealous of what they have and what they're doing, but also thinking it's disgusting and how awful. He's presenting the nuance of all of these things that come with wealth.
Do we want to just pause on the fact that Charlie Dean passed away late last year?
I didn't know this. Really?
So,
yes.
So a lot of the I've just been watching today some of the interviews at various festivals by the cast, and most of them are kind of honoring her. Like, she was only 32 and died suddenly.
Yeah.
So this is,
I had no idea.
Yeah, this is clearly she was great in it.
She was
and
great acting.
yeah, this is a big film, so kind of a fitting swan song to her career, I suppose.
That's a shame.
Bit dark, but
it is. No, I had no idea, and I was interested to watch her career from here. That is a shame. While we're talking about actors, we've talked about Harris Dickinson and Charlie Dean. The other real standout in this is Dolly DeLeon. She plays the cleaning lady, the head of the cleaning team, I think she is, that lives below decks.
She's the head of the toilet cleaning.
The toilet cleaning, specifically the toilet cleaning.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When it all goes to hell, when the boat sinks into the ocean and our small group of survivors end up on an island, she's one of them. And massive spoiler alert here, she just rises to the leader of this little group of people instantly, because she's the only one that knows how to do anything, how to start a fire, how to catch food. It's quite amazing. This, I think, was one of the absolutely brilliant things about this film, was what happens when they get to the island. I just love how all these wealthy people that you've seen be doted on turn out to be complete babies. They don't know how to do anything for themselves.
By the time they get to the island is when you think the film's probably due to finish and you've loved it.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden there's this third act, and really the third act, that is the film. Like, that is, you could almost get rid of the whole rest of it in a way. That is the crux of the film, that last bit. And she's great. Filipino actress.
She's amazing. She's amazing because, she fits the stereotype of that just so easily dismissed kind of working class person that you think will, just quietly go on her way. But then when she gets in this situation and she realizes very astutely that the tables have turned, boy, does she jump into that position of power so quickly, and just like with such confidence. It's just beautiful. Such a great role.
And power corrupts, yeah?
Yeah, totally.
Power corrupts. Like, she's no longer the likable little toilet cleaner. She abuses her power as much as anyone else.
However, I like her so much more for it.
Yeah, true.
Because what Ruben Östlund sets up so well is how unlikable all these other characters are. And so the comeuppance is beautiful. To see the tables turned on them is just wonderful. He's very rightly sort of read the temperature of the world right now, and just knows that people are fed up. They're fed up with the top 1%. They kind of want to see them all get their comeuppance, and that's exactly what you get.
The only thing I'd say on that is that his last couple of films, and I've heard this opinion in some of the reviews I've listened to just today, trying to remind myself what the film's about. But some of the last couple of films dealt with sort of cutting down some other types of people, like art curators and some less obvious bad guys, whereas this one sort of took a swipe at, people that we all think are wankers anyway, like the top 1%. So that was a criticism of the film, and it's probably fair enough. It's a pretty easy target to go for Russian oligarchs and weapon dealers.
Yeah, it worked because the Russian oligarchs represent the communists, and communists should be everyone on the same level. While there are people that became very rich at the right time when the opportunity came up. So I think that was like also demonstrated that when you have the opportunity, you take advantage of it.
Especially with Woody Harrelson's character blasting off Mark's into the PA system while the whole ship's going down. I had a quote from Ruben Östlund that I jotted down, and he just said, "Successful people are often very socially skilled, otherwise they wouldn't be so successful. There's an ongoing myth that successful people and rich people are horrible, but it's reductive. I wanted the sweet old English couple to be the most sympathetic characters in the film. They are nice and respectful to everyone. They just happen to have made their money on landmines and hand grenades." It's probably a more accurate description of the world, of what the world looks like. So I think he was attempting, while using some stereotypes, to make a comment on the character of these people as well.
Should we move quickly to Reminds Me Of? That might allow us to explore some other things.
Yeah, please. Yes. Let's do it. Who wants to kick it off?
I'm keen to hear Maestro's Italian film.
Well, the thing is that I rewatched recently. It's on YouTube for the entire movie. Unfortunately, it's not with subtitle, because I would really suggest to see this movie. Triangle of Sadness, it's exactly the same. This movie was done in 1974. The director was Lina Wertmüller. She was the first female director to be nominated at the Oscar, but for another movie, for Seven Beauty. This movie, it's called Swept Away. This director, actually, she always does movies with long title. The title of the movie is very long. So this one was, in English, Swept Away ... by an unusual destiny in the blue sea of August. In Italian was Travolti da un insolito destino nell'azzurro mare di agosto.
I missed just the second half of that.
Which was in 1974, and we talking about just after the economic boom in the 60s. All right, and with the rich boom, basically start a bit of differences in Italy between North and South. So the same situation of inequality was in this movie, the Italian one, but very located in Italy, and between North, the rich, and South, the poor. And we are in a boat. We have the North Italians on the boat. There is this lady, and the actress was Mariangela Merato. And the poor one, the one that lives under the boat, was Giancarlo Giannini, that did a few American movies as well, like also the 007. And then for a destiny, they end up on a little boat because they were trying to reach their friends in the evening. This little boat, the engine broke. So they stranded in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, and they at the end end up on this desert island. And that's when the guy, Giancarlo Giannini, realized that the power can flip. He was able to find food. He was able to turn on the fire. And then she was like, pray him to help her out. Power flipped in a way that it's an Italian way to describe things. He started to slap her in the face. And for each slap, he counted what the North people did to the Italians and South.
Oh,
wow. So one slap, this is for the oranges that you burn and destroy to make the price of the oranges and lemon inflation. Slap her in the face. And this is for the taxes that you don't pay. And you destroy the south of Italy by doing that. It's so much violence. And then he stopped and he said, no, actually, I want you to desire me.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So because that moment, and that's when in America, probably misunderstand the meaning of the movie. There was like a gender-based power of men, etc. Basically, he took over her. She's basically completely subdued. Half an hour later, she falls completely in love for him. And the rest of this movie, towards almost the end, it's an incredible, passionate relationship between the two. They just love each other so much. Then when finally they see a boat on the horizon, they almost says, please don't call this boat. Let's stay here, And he actually said, no, I want to call this boat because I want to see if your love is real. Without
Wow. So many parallels. So many parallels. Aside from the sort of the raping and slapping, that's a bit,
exactly,
like in this day and age that wouldn't play so well. But
it wouldn't play, but it's completely the same. It is completely the same. The conversation about rich and poor, the inequality, it's all there. And the scenario, both stranded in an island, flipped over power, a change of power.
You have to wonder if Ruben Östlund was aware of that film. There's a lot of parallels there.
Alina Wertmüller, it's quite an achieved and very popular director. She passed away a few years ago.
Yeah, and a female director working with that kind of material is interesting too.
It is really, really interesting.
Well, I'm going to come right out there and say that's going to trump any reminds me of that either myself or Baron come up with.
I think you're right. I think that's a ripper.
It's certainly better than my sort of flippant ones. Even so, we should have a crack, Baron. How about you?
Let's do it. I sort of have a couple themes, I suppose. One is just to name right off the top is that Ruben Östlund's work really reminds me of Thomas Vinterberg's work, which I think every time we've seen a Vinterberg film has prompted a Ruben Östlund reminds me of, right? But I think it's worth mentioning that films, I mean, I haven't seen all of Vinterberg's films at all. He's made a lot of stuff. Another Round we talked about on this podcast, and The Hunt we talked about when we talked about Another Round. And I think both of those are good just in themselves, reminds me of for this film.
I knew Östlund before Vinterberg, but when we saw Another Round, and I realized that was the same guy that did The Hunt.
Yeah.
And then I started to get the same feels.
Totally.
As Östlund. I completely agree with you. They are just at this European thing that they've got going that just is, looks more at the human condition and the, micro moments than we do in.
They can make something huge of the smallest interaction. It's quite beautiful, and it's something you're right. You don't really see that in Australian American cinema in particular.
It's like a new movement. It's starting in North of Europe.
The other reminds me of I had was just Korean cinema, which I love, but the whole class thing is an ongoing huge just part of Korean filmmaking. Parasite, Snowpiercer, Squid Game are just sort of three recent examples that really work on that level of class when the lower classes clash with the higher classes, and what happens when that uprising occurs,
or when the lower class become the upper class, basically.
Correct, when the tables are turned. Totally.
And everything they hate about the upper class, they just behave the same way at the end of the day. They get thrown in this behavior.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And, in this film in particular, there's all the smart, intelligent commentary about the upper class and the wealthy and the top 1%. But then there's just this wonderful, prolonged, gratuitously gross and almost gutter humor that just is when you see the wealthy with all of their beautiful clothes and their fine dining and so on get hit with just extreme seasickness, and you get a good, it's got to be 10 straight minutes, I reckon, of just them vomiting and being tossed from one end of the cabin to the next, being seen in like complete disarray and just their absolute lowest base human form.
That was an exceptional piece of cinema, wasn't it?
It really is. And I love that he doesn't let go, doesn't let off. Like he just holds it, plays it super long.
And exaggerate everything, like the vomit coming out from the toilet. It's just like maximize the moment as much as you can.
It's kind of like, it kind of reminded me of, like a symphony orchestra that just slowly is building to a giant climax. Like it has just little signs of things aren't well. Then one person vomits, then another, then the next thing they're all vomiting, and then they're all staggering through the hallways. All of their own excrement is exploding out of the toilets and they're getting covered in it. Like Beautiful.
It is interesting because rewatching the movie, there is a moment when they actually ask the captain if he wants to keep going doing the dinner on a Thursday night because they say actually
Yeah.
the weather is gonna be, and he said, yeah, no worry about it.
He doesn't
So
care.
he doesn't care. You don't even. I don't know. Maybe it was premeditated. It's something like that.
No, well, that's an interesting read. I just took it as that this is a guy who does not care
Don't
at
care.
all. Yeah. And this poster art I've got behind me is actually taken from the film. And if you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, they've actually replaced the vomit that's coming out of her mouth with like it's gold on this art. Pretty beautiful.
Which it is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh, one other thing just on this theme of the classes that this bit in particular reminded me of with the dinner. I had two. I had The Menu, the new Ray Fiennes film. I don't know if either of you have seen that.
I saw that recently. Very similar.
While I have some issues with the menu, there are some things in there that are really great, and this reminded me of that. And then The Hunger Games, to a degree. There's actually a reference in the Hunger Games where they sort of reference that Roman, I don't know if it's even real or if it's a myth, but that the wealthy would eat really expensive, rich foods and then go and vomit so that they could go back and eat more. That was part of the evening.
Yeah, anyway. I heard about it.
I think the reason it feels like a symphony to you too is that it's just so perfectly choreographed within an inch of its life, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the setup, I think they, through the whole shoot for days on end, they were rocking the whole thing. So I think
the whole set was on hydraulics, so they were actually feeling all those movements.
Yes, so I think a lot of it was probably, partially realistic.
I do have some more reminds me else, but I'll throw to you, Doc.
I've got so many, but none that are really deep. But probably the most stupid is Act 1. Remind me of Zoolander. When the
Please explain.
with the male actors,
yes,
kind of really focusing on their looks and how they walk and all of that.
They're all
sort
blue
of stuff.
stealing right there. Yeah,
all blue stealing. And then the scene on the boat. This seems obvious, but it really did remind me of The Love Boat, the old 70s TV show, which was very much focusing on both the staff and the guests. And intermingling between them and the relationships between them. That just feels like the biggest influence on that on the setup of that scene to me.
Sure. No, I can see that.
Yeah, and then I guess it soon becomes the Titanic when things go out of control, and then things like Downton Abbey, just with upstairs, downstairs.
Sure.
There's a couple from me. I've probably got some for the Act 3, but
yeah,
I'll let you guys have another.
I was about to jump into Act 3 as well. You're on the island. You can't walk past the Lord of the Flies. Just an obvious reference right there. And a show that I've just started watching, which I think there's at least 3 seasons, maybe 2 or 3. Yellow Jackets. I don't know if you've seen that or heard of it.
No.
I think it's
Kevin Costner.
No,
that's Yellowstone.
That's a Yellowstone. That's Yellowstone. Yellowstone.
Yeah, no. Yellow Jackets is kind of similar. It's sort of a cross between Lord of the Flies and Alive. So you've got a girls' soccer team, all high school students crash in the middle of the wilderness somewhere, and then they go all tribal. Both of those made me think of it. And also there's something in Yellow Jackets, I'm still early on, but you're getting a sense that some of the characters that were kind of the nerds that nobody liked or were not popular at all were actually the ones that were at Girl Scouts learning how to make fires and do first aid and stuff, things like that. So tables flipped that way. And then I had one that popped into my head that I was really reminded of. I don't know if you've ever read any Eugene O'Neill, any of his plays. He's got this 1-act play called Thirst that I just randomly read some years back. And it's about a group of people that have come off of a cruise ship that sunk, and they've ended up in a single life raft together. And the whole play takes place in the life raft. And I think they're either I can't remember if in the Mediterranean or the Caribbean, but there's someplace hot, and they're slowly getting thirstier and thirstier. And on this boat, you've got some a couple, like 1 or 2 wealthy people, some of the crew, and some of the service staff on there, and they're all arguing It's been a little while since I've read it, but it really reminded me of the situation you end up with in this film.
Many things you talk about arguing when they are at the island. Yes, there is a bit of argument, but there is also a bit of a laugh. And laugh
Yes.
there is like then even bonding moments when, especially when the boy they use the whistle to call the boy, and when he should go back to the boat with the lady. So it is interesting, but there are also really light moments. Like it make you think, but it's really light the way it make you think.
I agree. The fact that he keeps it so that you can laugh, it doesn't get too deep and dark at any given point.
Yeah.
What you both said then reminds me of Gilligan's Island, because they were stranded and they had the millionaire and his wife and the movie star and the professor and all these different people in different classes, and to see how that plays out in a deserted island setting is a little similar. The end result's a bit different, but
that's right. I think they sort of maintain their existing social structure, don't they? Or they attempt to.
Yeah.
In Gilligan's Island,
they do.
Which probably doesn't make a lot of sense, honestly. This feels truer.
Well, but they tried in this movie too. The lady from the one that was coordinating the boat, she tried to exercise her power, but then it was immediately clear that you can't do it.
Didn't she? Yeah,
immediately, because
dominated swiftly and effectively. Yeah.
So we're saying that this film is in conversation with Gilligan's Island.
Yes, absolutely. Doc, any third act references?
Heaps. I thought of Lost briefly. I thought of M. Night Shyamalan's latest Old.
Yep.
I thought of Indecent Proposal. Remember that film back in the 80s or 90s?
Is that $1 million for a night with your wife? Was that the deal?
Was it Robert Redford, maybe?
Robert Redford, I think. $1
million for a night with your wife. So that felt very similar to Dolly getting favors from Dickinson.
I love the way Dickinson says, "I love you. You give me food." It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And the last one for me was The Beach. Alex Garland slash who directed the film again?
Danny Boyle.
Danny Boyle, of course, your mate. Yeah, particularly the the ending is quite mysterious of this film, and what I think we end on from memory was Dickinson running through the jungle.
Yeah, so mysterious. Yes.
Yeah, but that reminded me very much of Leonardo DiCaprio in The Beach, kind of going a bit, loco.
Totally.
I think, look, it's funny. I went to see the movie again with my lovely wife, and she interpreted that he started running because he hear the girlfriend screaming.
Let's actually talk about the ending quickly, because so spoiler alert for everyone, we're going to get right into the very ending of this film, but just to give it a quick little beat by beat, we've got Yaya, the girlfriend, supermodel kind of influencer girlfriend, has gone for a walk with, what's the character? Is it Dolly?
Dolly's
Abigail.
The actor.
Dolly's the actor.
Yeah.
Abigail's the character, and she's the one who was the head of the toilet cleaning department, is now running the whole show. They've gone off and for a walk to explore the other side of the mountains, and discovered that there was a resort there the whole time, and they're actually not on an island, and they could have been saved probably a lot earlier. And then Abigail goes off, and while Yaya's turned, grabs a big ass rock, and you just start sneaking towards her, and you're thinking, wait, is she about to club her on the head so that she can maintain their little kingdom that they've created? And then you don't see how that plays out, and it just hard cuts to the boyfriend, Carl Dickinson, running full pelt through the jungle. It's quite. I found the ending, particularly that last shot of him running, a little disappointing. I wasn't into it.
Well,
I found it invigorating.
Did you?
Beautiful.
You liked it too.
Yeah.
I just didn't need that. I was happy with it ending on us not knowing if Abigail was going to club Yaya or not. The Carl running just put a massive extra question mark in there that I didn't feel like I needed. That's interesting. So you were both okay with it?
Yeah. I don't know why. There is the entire movie, I think it's quite a dramatic movie, but you don't feel that. I think that last scene, it gives you actually the drama that the movie that says that this is a dramatic movie. They give all the drama you haven't seen or perceived during the movie. It's in that final scene.
When you
As I
say
said,
final scene, do you mean that final?
him running,
just him running?
But also it's like he's getting slapped in the face all the time because it goes through the leaves and it scratches face, etc. So I don't know, there is something that found out that actually I quite like it.
Interesting that one read that your wife had, Maestro, was that it was Carl heard something. My read on it was that he just suddenly occurred to him that Abigail might be taking his girlfriend out there to kill her.
That was my take on too. I was thinking that he finally realized that work they're doing together, his girlfriend is in danger.
She's in the way.
Yeah,
essentially.
Yeah.
Given his arc, it could equally be, that he's worried for Abigail.
That's true. That's true.
But
could go
it's
either
really
way.
just the freneticism, and I think it just plays on your emotions, and a good way to finish the film with a sense of your adrenaline pumping. So that's all it does for me. I just think it obviously adds 100 different permutations of possibilities, but it just has you finish in a state of high emotion.
I just wonder if that shot was debated, because I would have fought for cutting it personally, and I wonder how that all played out.
Well, I think we've explored all three sides of Triangle of Sadness. Other than just a little bit of trivia, that I find it a little bit odd that his last two films have both been shapes. Like he had the square and now the triangle. So I'm looking forward to the octagon of melancholy.
All right, guys, so good chatting with you, even over Zoom. Prefer it in the studio, which we will get back to on the next episode for sure. Episode 70 of whatever it is we decide to do.
Can't wait to be back in the studio, gentlemen.
See ya, guys.
See ya.
Bye.